Parker Avery was juggling a screaming 4-year-old, a juice-stained shirt, and a grocery bag with a hole in it when he first saw her on the floor of the bakery aisle. Her back pressed against the shelves of bagels, breathing like the air was running away from her. Hey, are you all right?" he asked, crouching low, careful not to let his son's tiny hand slip from his grip. The woman didn't respond. Her eyes were wide, her chest rising too fast. She pressed her palms to the cool tile like she was trying to anchor herself. "Zane," Parker said to his son, "hold on to my leg, buddy." Zane nodded, his small fingers gripping his dad's jeans. Parker turned back to the woman. She looked like she'd just stepped out of a magazine, long dark hair, a designer coat that probably cost more than his rent, and heels that didn't belong anywhere near a grocery store. But right now, she was falling apart. "Okay, listen to me," Parker said softly, gently. "You're having a panic attack. It's gonna pass all right. Just look at me." She blinked, but her eyes were still glassy. "What's your name?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "Olivia." "Hi, Olivia, I'm Parker. This little man is my son, Zane. You're okay. Just breathe with me, all right?" He inhaled deeply, slowly, exaggerating every breath so she could follow. Olivia tried, her breath catching at first, then slowly sinking with his. After a few minutes, her shoulders dropped a little. Her hands stopped shaking. "There you go," Parker said. "See? You're doing great." She let out a shaky laugh. "This is the most humiliating thing that's ever happened to me." "Nope," Parker said with a grin. "You haven't seen me try to assemble a crib at 3 in the morning." That made her smile just a little. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. I haven't had one in months. It just hit out of nowhere." "You're all right," he said again. "Sometimes life just sideswipes you." Zane tugged on his shirt. "Daddy, can we get cookies now?" Parker laughed. "Sure, buddy, just a second." He turned back to Olivia. "Do you want me to call someone for you? A friend?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I'd rather not." She stood up slowly, wobbling a little in her heels. Parker instinctively reached out to steady her. "Thank you, Parker," she said again, brushing her hair behind her ear. I should go." "You sure you're okay?" "I will be," she said, her voice quiet but steadier than before. She walked off quickly, like she was trying to disappear. Parker watched her go, wondering who she was and what kind of life made someone that polished break down in a grocery store. He didn't expect to see her again. But 3 days later, she was standing outside his auto shop. It was late afternoon, and Parker was elbow-deep in engine grease when he spotted the sleek black car parked out front. The woman who stepped out didn't match the neighborhood, or the car. "Olivia," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. She smiled nervously. "I swear I'm not stalking you. That's something a stalker would say," she laughed. I wanted to thank you properly." "You already did." "Well, now I brought coffee," she said, holding up 2 cups from a place too fancy for his side of town. He hesitated. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, setting them down on the workbench, "but I wanted to." Zane ran out from the back, covered in marker and holding a toy car. "Daddy, look what He stopped when he saw Olivia. "Hi again." "Hi, Zane," she said with a smile. Parker raised an eyebrow. "You remembered his name." "I remember a lot of things," she said softly. They talked for a while over too expensive coffee and the distant hum of air compressors. She didn't say much about herself except that she was in consulting. He didn't press. He'd learned people only opened up when they wanted to, but she came back again. And again, sometimes with pastries, sometimes with books for Zane. Once, with a new set of wrenches Parker couldn't afford but desperately needed. "You really don't have to keep bringing stuff," Parker said one afternoon, walking her to her car. "I know," she replied, "but I like seeing you." Something shifted then. "The air changed. You like seeing me?" he asked, surprised. She nodded. "You're the first person who's looked at me like I wasn't a mess, or a means to something." He studied her. "You don't seem like a mess to me. You don't know me." "I'd like to," he said, almost without realizing it. Olivia froze, then smiled, slow and real. "Good. Because I'd like that too." That night, Parker couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about her laugh, the way she looked at Zane, how she always showed up like she didn't mean to stay then lingered anyway. He didn't know what her world looked like, but he knew it wasn't this one. Still, she kept coming back, and one crisp evening, leaning against his truck under the fading sunset, she asked, Can I take you and Zane out to dinner? Parker blinked. Like, a real dinner, a real one, she said. Somewhere with cloth napkins and wine that doesn't come in a box, he laughed. You sure about that? I'm sure. He looked at her, really looked. She was beautiful, complicated, and clearly hiding something, but her eyes were honest. All right, he said, but you're driving. My truck's allergic to cloth napkins. She laughed, and her hand found his, and just like that, something started, something real, something neither of them expected. The restaurant Olivia chose sat on the 37th floor of a high-rise that overlooked the skyline, like it was royalty surveying its kingdom. Parker adjusted the collar of the only button-down shirt he owned, a hand-me-down from his brother-in-law, and a little too snug in the shoulders. Zane walked beside him in a tiny blazer Olivia had dropped off that afternoon, claiming it was just lying around. Parker doubted that. "Daddy," Zane whispered as they stepped into the elevator, "are we allowed to eat here?" "I think so, bud," Parker replied, eyeing his own reflection in the mirrored walls. "But let's not touch anything gold just in case." When the elevator doors opened, Olivia was already waiting. She wore a sleek navy dress that shimmered faintly under the chandelier light, her hair swept back in a way that made her look even more untouchable. But the moment she smiled at them, the air shifted. "You both clean up dangerously well," she said, crouching to Zane's height. "You look like a future heartbreaker," Zane beamed. "I have Batman socks. Clearly a man of style," she said, standing to meet Parker's eyes. "And you, is this shirt vintage or just lucky?" "Definitely unlucky," Parker said. "I might not be able to lift my arms past my shoulders." She laughed and gestured toward the hostess. "Come on, I got us a table by the windows." The dining room was all glass and candlelight, the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the waitstaff floated instead of walked. Parker kept one hand on Zane's shoulder as they followed Olivia, mentally calculating how many oil changes it would take to afford a single appetizer. "So," she said once they were seated, and the sommelier had poured water from a bottle that probably cost more than Parker's monthly grocery bill. "I have a confession." "That sounds dangerous," Parker said, adjusting his napkin and watching Zane carefully unfold his with the gravity of a surgeon. "I might have lured you here under false pretenses." He arched a brow. "Is this a trap?" "Depends," she said, her tone light but her gaze searching. "Are you afraid of heights?" He looked out the window at the glittering city. "Only when I'm not the one climbing." "That's a better answer than I expected." The waiter arrived just then, rattling off specials Parker had no hope of pronouncing. Olivia listened, nodded once, then placed an order that made Parker's head spin. When the waiter turned to him, Olivia cut in gently. "Just trust me," she said. "You'll like it." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, surprise me." Once the waiter left, Olivia leaned forward slightly. "I wanted tonight to be different." "Not because you need impressing, but because I do." Parker frowned. "You don't owe me anything." "I know, that's the problem. I'm used to people expecting something in return." "You didn't." He watched her for a moment. "You're not what I expected either." "Let me guess," she said, sipping her water. "You thought I was going to disappear after the bakery aisle incident? I figured you had your own world to get back to." "I do. But it's quieter when you're not in it." Zane, oblivious to the tension curling between the adults, pointed at the wine glasses. "Why are these shaped funny?" "They make the drinks fancier," Olivia said, her voice softening. "Like magic potions." Zane nodded solemnly. "I like grape juice better." "It makes my tongue purple," Parker grinned. He's a connoisseur. Dinner arrived in waves. Dishes with delicate garnishes and names Parker couldn't remember, but the food was good, excellent, actually. Zane ate with the enthusiasm of a boy who'd never seen shrimp this size. Olivia watched them both, a quiet contentment settling over her features. "Can I ask you something?" Parker said as they lingered over dessert. "Shoot." "Why me?" Her fork paused mid-air. "Why not you?" "Because I own a garage, live in a 2-bedroom duplex, and haven't been on a real date since my ex-wife moved to Colorado with her yoga instructor." Olivia set down her fork. "I didn't pick you out of pity, Parker. I didn't pick you at all. You happened, and it felt honest. Like I could breathe again." He met her gaze. "So what is this, Olivia? A fling with the mechanic? A break from your world?" She flinched. "Is that what you think?" I don't know what to think. You show up, you give Zane books I can't afford, you feed me duck I didn't even know people ate, and you look at me like I'm supposed to keep up. Her voice dropped. I look at you like I wish I could stay. Parker exhaled slowly, tension locking his jaw. I've made mistakes, Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not the kind you apologize for and move on from, the kind that change everything. I'm not asking you to fix me, I'm asking if you'll let me be real with you. He reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. Then be real. Just don't disappear when it gets complicated. A pause. Then she nodded, eyes shining. Okay. The ride home was quiet. Zane fell asleep in the backseat of Olivia's luxury SUV, his head slumped against the window. Parker sat beside her in the passenger seat, his fingers drumming lightly on his thigh. You know, he said, I think this car costs more than my entire shop. You're probably right, she said with a small smile. Are you going to tell me how you afford all this? Eventually, he looked at her. That's not a no. It's not a lie either. She pulled into his driveway, headlights washing over the cracked pavement and the small porch. Parker unbuckled Zane gently, cradling him against his chest. Do you want to come in? He asked. She looked at the house, then at him. I'd better not, but thank you, he nodded. Thank you for dinner and everything. As he turned toward the door, she called out softly, Parker? Yeah, I don't want this to be temporary, he swallowed hard. Then don't let it be. She drove off slowly, her taillights disappearing down the street. Inside, Parker laid Zane in bed and sat down in the living room, staring at the dark window. He wasn't sure what Olivia was running from, but he knew something was coming. He just didn't know how close it already was. The knock came just after 9, when Parker had finally settled Zane in bed after a long day of school drop-off, a backed-up carburetor on a '72 Mustang, and a late pickup from his sister who watched Zane after school. He wasn't expecting anyone. Not this late. Not on a Wednesday. He opened the door to find Olivia, her face pale and drawn, her hands jammed into the pockets of a cashmere trench coat that looked like it belonged on a runway, not his cracked front stoop. Her eyes didn't carry that careful polish she always wore. They were bare and tired and searching. I'm sorry, she said before he could speak. I didn't know where else to go. You okay? He asked, stepping aside without hesitation. She nodded, but the kind of nod that meant no. She didn't say anything as she walked in, her footsteps slower than usual, her spine not quite as straight. She didn't meet his eyes until she'd made it to the center of the room, where the lamp on the side table cast soft light over the worn couch and scattered toy cars. I just came from a meeting with my father's lawyer, she said, voice tight. He passed away last week. I didn't go to the funeral. Parker closed the door behind her. You don't have to explain. I do, actually, she said, turning slowly. Because I think you're the only person I've met in years who doesn't already know who I am before I speak, and I need you to know anyway. He leaned against the wall, arms loosely crossed. All right. She took a breath that trembled. My full name is Olivia Astor Vale. My father was Curtis Vale. He owned Vale International, which I know who that is, Parker said quietly. I figured, she replied. After the first time I saw your face on the news when they covered his antitrust trial, I prayed no one would ever link my name to his again. But now that he's gone, I inherited everything. His estate, his position, his mess. Parker didn't respond right away, he just watched her, waiting. I didn't want any of it, she continued. I left that world after I turned 25. I took my trust payout, changed addresses, and started over. I thought I could outrun it. But now they want me to take the board seat. They want me to clean up the company's image. They want me to become the very thing I swore I'd never be. And what do you want? Parker asked. She laughed, but it was hollow. I want to be the woman who delivers pastries to your garage and watches your son read picture books with crayon on his fingers. I want to be normal. But that's not who I am, is it? You're the woman who showed up at my door tonight, not because you needed anything from me, but because you knew I'd listen. She looked at him then, really looked. Do you think that's enough, just showing up? He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. It's more than most people ever do, she blinked hard. I don't know how to be in this world and that one at the same time. Then don't, he said. Pick the one that feels like you. What if neither does? Then make a new one, she stared at the floor. I'm not like you, Parker. I don't know how to build things. He tilted his head. You're here, that's a start. She sat down on the couch, her shoulders slumping, her coat folding awkwardly beneath her. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, watching her wrestle with ghosts he couldn't see but recognized all the same. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Sure. Why haven't you asked me to leave? Because you need a place to land, she exhaled slowly. I don't think anyone's ever said that to me. Then they've been idiots. Her lips twitched. You don't even flinch when I talk about billions of dollars and corporate scandals. I don't care about that. I care that you're here and you're hurting and you're still trying. She swallowed hard. I don't know how to stop running. You don't have to stop, just maybe don't do it alone. She looked at him, and something in her expression softened something that hadn't surfaced since their first night at the restaurant. Not relief exactly, not clarity, but a lull in the storm, a pause. Stay, he said quietly. If you want to. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway. Zane's asleep, out cold. I brought him something, she said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a small wooden model of a vintage plane, its wings delicately carved, its body painted with tiny stars. He told me last week he wanted to be a pilot, she added. I thought maybe this could remind him he can. Parker took the plane in his hands, inspecting its craftsmanship. He's gonna love this. I wanted to give it to you before I told you everything, she said. But now I think it means more after. I think you're right. She stood then, slowly, like she wasn't sure what she was supposed to do next. Parker rose with her. I should go, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. You don't have to. I know, she said, but I need to think, and I don't want to say the wrong thing now that you know. Then say something honest. She hesitated, then stepped forward and kissed him soft, brief, and unsure, like a question waiting for an answer. When she pulled back, her eyes searched his. That's all I've got right now. It's enough, he said, brushing his thumb gently along her jaw. She nodded once, then turned and walked out into the night, not looking back. Parker stood still for a long time after the door closed. In his hands, the wooden plane felt heavier than it looked. Upstairs, Zane stirred but didn't wake. And outside, in the distance, a different kind of storm was beginning to roll in. The morning light filtered through the garage windows in thin golden stripes, catching the edge of Parker's workbench. The scent of motor oil and warm metal hung in the air as he adjusted the timing belt on a Civic that looked like it had been to war and back. Zane was in the back office with Parker's sister, who'd agreed to help out during spring break, but Parker's mind wasn't on the engine. It had been 4 days since Olivia left his porch with a kiss and a truth that still echoed in his bones. Every time his hands stilled, her face surfaced. He didn't expect her to show up today. Not after the way she'd pulled back to think. But when he heard the purr of that familiar engine outside the one too quiet, too precise for anything built before the last recession, he wiped his hands automatically and stepped toward the door. She didn't step out right away. He could see her through the windshield, gripping the steering wheel like she was bracing for something. Then, after a beat, she opened the door and climbed out, wearing a navy blazer and jeans, not a dress. Not silk or heels, and her hair was pulled into a loose knot like she hadn't even glanced in a mirror before getting in the car. I went to the board meeting, she said before he could speak. I turned them down. Parker leaned against the frame of the door, arms crossed, eyes steady. And they weren't thrilled, she let out a breath, but I made it clear. I'm not here to polish a legacy I don't believe in. I'm not my father. He nodded once, letting her talk. I told them I'd divest from the company. I'm keeping my shares long enough to redirect the profits into something that matters, then I'm done. I want to build something new, from the ground up. You sure that's what you want? Yes, she said, stepping closer. But there's more. He waited. I've been offered a grant to fund a nonprofit, something I started sketching out last year when I was still hiding out in my apartment, trying to convince myself I didn't care about anything anymore. It's a mental health initiative for women in high-pressure careers. Real resources. Real support. That sounds like you. It's the first thing in years that does. She looked down at her hands. But I don't want to do it alone. I don't want to build a new life if you're not in it. Parker didn't move, but something in his expression shifted. I'm not asking you to move into a penthouse or let me rearrange your life. I just want to be part of it. The real parts, the messy days, the broken engines and school runs and bedtime stories. He stepped forward, closing the space between them. "You're not walking into a fairy tale, Olivia. I know. That's why I'm here." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Zane's home." She nodded. "I was hoping he would be." They walked inside together. Parker's sister gave a curious glance but said nothing, just grabbed her keys and waved goodbye. Zane came bounding out of the back room, crashing into Olivia's legs before he even realized who it was. "You came back," he said, eyes wide. "I did," she said, crouching to meet him. "I brought something for you if your dad says it's okay." Parker watched as she pulled a folded paper from her pocket and handed it to Zane. It was a hand-drawn map, colorful, detailed, with winding roads and a small red X marked in the center. "What is it?" Zane asked. "A treasure map," she said. "This weekend, if you want, we can go find it. It leads to a cabin near the lake. It's small, but it's quiet. And there's trees and stars at night and a swing hanging from a tree that looks like it's been there forever." Zane looked up at his dad. "Can we?" Parker crouched beside him. "You want to go on an adventure?" Zane nodded with both hands. "Then yeah, I think we can do that." That weekend, the cabin was exactly what Olivia promised, tucked away in the woods, weathered just enough to feel lived in. The fireplace crackled as Zane dozed off on an old leather couch with a comic book on his chest. Olivia stood in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring hot chocolate into mismatched mugs. "You need help with that?" Parker asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I've got it," she said, leaning back into him. "You know I don't want a castle, right?" He kissed her temple. "I figured. This place, it's not mine, not yet. I rented it for the weekend, but it's for sale, cheap because it needs work." His brow lifted. "You thinking about buying it?" She turned, facing him fully. "I'm thinking about what it could become. A retreat center, a safe place for women to reset, and maybe a home too." Parker took a slow breath, the kind that settled deep in his chest. "You sure you're ready for that? I'm sure I don't want to keep pretending I'm not." He looked at her for a long moment, then he took her hands in his. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd get anything past what I already had. After Zane's mom left, I figured that was it. One chapter closed, but then you fell apart in front of me, and instead of running, you let me see you." "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "That's the point. It was real." She pressed her forehead to his. "I love you, Parker," he smiled, slow and certain. "I love you too." Outside, the forest whispered in the wind. Inside, they sat on the couch beside Zane, who stirred just enough to curl against Olivia's side. She wrapped an arm around the boy without hesitation. Parker pulled the blanket over them, the three of them tucked into something that felt like more than comfort. It felt like family. Neither of them knew what the future would bring. But for the first time, it didn't matter, because they weren't running from anything anymore. They were building something worth staying for. Together. The sun hung low over the horizon as Olivia pulled the last sheet from the clothesline behind the cabin. The breeze carried the scent of pine, and far off, the sound of Zane's laughter echoed near the lake, where Parker was helping him build a raft out of driftwood and stubborn optimism. Olivia folded the sheets slowly, her hands methodical, her mind anything but. "I thought you hated laundry," Parker called as he approached, his shirt damp from the lake and Zane's overzealous splashing. Olivia looked over her shoulder. "I hate it when it piles up. Out here, it's almost meditative." He reached for the basket beside her. "You're starting to sound like someone who's not planning on leaving." "I'm not," she said, looking up at him. "I filed the purchase paperwork yesterday. The cabin's mine now." Parker paused. "You bought it," she nodded. "It's official. I want this place to be the starting point. For everything." "I thought you said you needed time to figure out what came next." "I did," she said, "and this is it. I want to build the retreat center here, just like we talked about, and I want to do it with you." He studied her for a moment. "You sure? This isn't just a place." "It's a commitment. I know what I'm asking, and I'm done pretending I want anything less." His gaze softened. "Then we make it ours." That evening, Olivia stood in the kitchen with flour on her cheek and Parker behind her, helping Zane roll dough for a pie crust. There was music playing from an old speaker someone had left behind, and the lights above flickered faintly as the generator hummed outside. It didn't feel like luxury. It felt like life. "You know," Olivia said as she leaned over the counter, I never imagined I'd end up here. In a kitchen that creaks every time you walk across it, with a 5-year-old bossing me around about how much cinnamon goes in a pie. Zane, without looking up, said, "It's called flavor layering." Parker laughed. "You've created a monster." "I prefer chef," Zane replied. Later, after Zane was asleep with flour still on his cheek and a dog-eared book under his pillow, Parker found Olivia standing on the porch, wrapped in a worn blanket. The stars above were clearer than they'd looked in years. "Can I ask you something?" she said as he stepped beside her. "Of course. Do you remember the first time you saw me?" He smiled slightly. "You mean when you were hyperventilating next to a bag of everything bagels?" She nudged him with her shoulder. "I was a disaster. You were human. And maybe the most real thing I'd seen in a long time. I didn't think anyone would look at me and see anything worth holding on to." "I did," he said, "long before you believed it yourself." She turned toward him fully. "Then maybe it's time I give you something to hold on to." From her pocket, she pulled out a slim black box and opened it to reveal a silver key, simple and unadorned. "I had a copy made," she said, "to the cabin, and to the studio we're building next to it. I want you to have it." He took it from her hand, his thumb brushing the cool metal. "You're really not going anywhere, are you?" "No," she said. "I'm exactly where I want to be." Parker slipped the key into his pocket, then cupped her face in his hands. "I've spent years thinking I had to protect Zane from new beginnings, that anything different might break the fragile peace we'd found, but you didn't break anything, you gave us more." She leaned into him, her voice steady. "Then let's keep building it." Together, he kissed her, slow and certain, beneath a sky filled with stars neither of them had noticed before. There was no urgency, no fear. Just the quiet, powerful ache of two people who had stopped running. Over the next few months, the cabin transformed. The front porch was reinforced, the deck extended to face the lake. Inside, Parker tore out the rotted floorboards while Olivia painted the walls in warm earth tones and soft ivory. A workshop went up beside the tree's half-office for her nonprofit half-studio for community classes. Locals started dropping by to offer help, and Olivia, once guarded and unreachable, welcomed each of them with something Zane called her bossy kindness. They hosted the first Women's Weekend that fall. 6 women arrived uncertain, carrying more silence than words. By Sunday, there was laughter spilling through the trees and the smell of fresh bread from the kitchen Olivia had once called a glorified closet. Parker fixed a broken pipe, taught one woman how to change a tire, and spent the rest of the time letting Zane lead nature hikes that mostly involved collecting rocks and naming squirrels. After the guests left, Olivia stood in the doorway of the studio, watching the smoke curl from the chimney, her hand resting on her stomach. "I have something I need to tell you," she said as Parker walked in. He froze, reading her eyes before she could speak. "Are you?" She nodded. "Yes." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "We're having a baby," she nodded again, this time with tears in her eyes. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay," he said against her hair. "You, me, Zane, and now this. It's a full life." They stood in silence for a long moment, breathing in the future. That winter, Parker built a cradle from cedar and old parts of the porch rail Olivia refused to throw away. Zane painted stars above the crib while Olivia read out loud to the baby, her voice low and steady. And on a snowy morning in early March, with the fire crackling and the scent of cinnamon in the air, they gathered around the newest member of their family, a baby girl with soft eyes and a shock of dark hair. Parker held her gently, then looked at Olivia. "You gave me more than a life. You gave me a home." Olivia smiled as Zane leaned over the baby, whispering, "You're gonna love it here." Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Inside, love wrapped around them like the warmth of the fire, steady and enduring. They had found each other in the most unexpected place. And they never let go.